Hi, this is Kyle Blakely with Mark Waller, and this is another episode of We Have Issues, a podcast about Colorado politics and the issues affecting us here in the state, with a little extra emphasis on the Pikes Peak region, since that's where we live. And that'll be our guest today, actually. The El Paso County Clerk and Recorder, Steve Schleiker, is going to join us again. But before then, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the results from last week. It has been 7 days, and interestingly enough, some things have changed since election night. So give us a chance to talk about those a little bit, and then even maybe talk about them some with Steve when he gets here. But Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. What a surprising election, huh? Kind of bizarre.
I had a lot of surprises. I probably, maybe subconsciously, I did this. I can't find our prediction sheet, but I'm got to be positive that I did the worst of anybody on that. So,
Yeah, I actually
yeah,
felt like I did pretty well on the predictions with a couple of exceptions. Number one, I didn't think Republicans were going to retain control of the U.S. Congress. And I think there's still some votes being counted, but everybody, knows that's going to happen. Republicans are going to have control of all three legs of the stool: the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Two, I absolutely shocked that Donald Trump got the popular vote. I thought he was going to win. I thought he was going to win the Electoral College vote, but absolutely surprised that he got the popular vote. And three, I'm a little bit surprised in Colorado. Republicans had a better night than I expected. I put a post out kind of the day after the election saying Colorado remains a blue iceberg while the rest of the country has, is engulfed in a red wave. And it looks like I might have been a little bit wrong about that. It looks like, the Republicans in the state House are going to maybe pick up 3 seats, one of
wow.
which we'll talk about today, Rebecca Kelty. It's like the Senate is going to it's going to do exactly what we thought it was going to do. The people that we thought were going to win won, and the people we thought were going to lose lost.
Yeah.
And it looks like in that that CD8 race, the U.S. Congressional District number 8 in Colorado, is going to flip to Republican, and I thought Yardea Carveo, the Democrat, was going to win there.
Yeah, that was a surprising one. Back real quick on the presidential popular vote. I was looking at it this morning. Trump is at about 75 million. Harris is at about 71 million. From 4 years ago, I don't know how many ballots are left to be counted, but that's only 1 million more votes for Trump than he got 4 years ago. But Harris has 10 million fewer votes than Biden from 4 years ago. So interestingly enough, I mean, it wasn't some huge shift of people switching over to Trump. I mean, only 1 million more. He had a bigger jump in the popular vote from 16 to 20 when he lost in 20. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, some of the local stuff, Rebecca Kelty coming back. I mean, right now that's 21 votes difference between them. That's kind of interesting. And then in Colorado Springs, to me, the other one that was really interesting were the 2 ballot issues on marijuana. 2D, the one to put an amendment in the city charter prohibiting recreational marijuana ever in the city on election night, and even for a couple of days afterwards, was passing. And now it has flipped, it's losing. And then issue 300 to allow recreational marijuana was running just about even with 2D, and now it's still passing. So I believe coming up at some point, recreational marijuana is going to be legal in Colorado Springs.
And that's when I think you and I both thought that was going to happen at some point, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I thought it was going to happen this election cycle, and was kind of surprised on election night when we were talking about those numbers and just how they kind of looked. I thought that was a little bit weird. But I thought marijuana was going to be legalized in Colorado Springs at some point. I still think the way that ballot initiative was written was probably not the most ethical way to do it, but
Yeah,
hey, it obviously meant the legal criteria or it wouldn't have gotten on the ballot.
yeah,
What,
yeah.
why do you think, given what you know about the presidential race and how many votes, Trump got this year versus 4 years ago versus 16, and the same with Harris, why do you think he ended up winning the popular vote? I think that's something everybody's trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, you hear all kinds of theories. There's people saying, that it was uh, obviously the economy. I mean, yeah, over the last 6 or 8 months, inflation's come way down, unemployment's at 4%. I mean, on election day, the numbers all looked pretty good, but I think there was just enough pain over the last few years, especially with inflation, that I think a lot of people, I think the economy, I think immigration was another issue that the Democrats may have kind of missed the boat on a little bit in terms of understanding just how big of an issue or recognizing the level of the crisis sooner. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what you hear. You also, people throwing around misogyny, not wanting to vote for a woman or whatever. But to me, I mean, again, at this point, the fascinating thing really is just fewer votes cast this year than 4 years ago. That's what's interesting to me is it's not that 10 million people switched to Trump, people just stayed home.
Yeah, maybe it's just that they weren't motivated to get out and vote, and there is something to, trying to get your base motivated. And you can understand why that might be the case, right? With the Democrats switching
Yep.
candidates, with only 107 days before the election, that probably impacts motivation issues. Another thing I saw you're talking about some of the misogyny issues, and maybe that is the case. I know, Trump made big inroads with Hispanic voters. I think
Yep.
he ended up with 40 something percent of the Hispanic vote. And that can be attributed to, in large part, to male Hispanics voting in much larger numbers for Trump. In fact, um, I saw some exit polling that said 55%, 55% of Hispanic males voted for Trump in this election. So,
Interesting.
maybe that has something to do with the misogyny that's out there. I mean, it's absolutely a possibility. There are some other folks, I've been hearing a lot of analysis on this. I think it's kind of interesting that, a lot of men feel that masculinity is under attack and that guys can't be masculine anymore. I think it's kind of an interesting discussion in that young males in particular, feel very threatened by this. They just can't exercise masculinity the way that we could as young men when we were coming along. And, well, maybe Trump's version of masculinity isn't something that either you or I would project out there. It's at
Yeah.
least something that people could gravitate to. I also heard that again, some exit polling data showed that, believe it or not, moms of young men really broke Trump's way. And some of the thought behind that was maybe it's because, um, because, well, uh, their, daughters are off being able to become more successful. A lot of these young men are, kind of given up on life and just sitting at home in the basement playing video games and aren't motivated to get out because they just feel oppressed in some way. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that moms of young men really cut towards Trump. So I don't necessarily know what to read into that, but I think it's
Yeah.
interesting data.
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday kind of about that same issue and the education disparity now between young women and young men. And like, again, half the young men who didn't graduate from college, who aren't even bothering in the workforce, uh, the reason is saying disabled or whatever. I don't know. There's just the whole thing, the education issue, all of it is fascinating. I think younger males in general, along with their moms, uh, more of them voted for Trump this time than before. But again, we're talking about all these categories where Trump got more votes, but overall, he didn't, he didn't even get,
We got higher percentages of votes. He
yeah,
didn't.
no, I know, but it's still
Right.
only translated into 1 million more
Right.
total votes.
Yeah.
So that that to me is interesting, or something, who knows by the time they get done counting all of them. Maybe it'll catch up to last year, but I mean, that'd be like 9 million more votes to be counted, which just doesn't seem like that's
Mhm.
probably the case, but who knows? We do have our guest waiting, so if we want to jump over to him real quick, or if you want to add anything else before we do.
Well, I was just going to say one last thing on this topic before we get to our guest. I have been talking to my friends on the Democratic side of the aisle a lot, and believe it or not, I have lots of friends on the Democratic side of the aisle. That doesn't make me a Republican in name only, but I'm sure I'll be accused of that. And they certainly do feel they lost this election. They don't think this is some sort of fluke, and they do think there needs to be some sort of recalibration within the Democratic Party. And they really need to kind of go back and take a look at this election and figure out what it was that caused them to lose. But I think there are a lot of issues related to it, and certainly they do think they got their asses kicked on last Tuesday, and they're trying to figure out where they need to go moving forward. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So, all right, I'm going to let Mr. Schleiker in. There he is.
Oh my God, that picture from when he was in high school. I still love it. Oh, there he is. Wow.
Check you fellers out. So,
How's it going?
Kyle, I'll tell you what, man, I think I've aged about 10 years in this last week, but other than that, man, it's all good.
Good, very good.
Yeah.
Man, crazy things happening.
Oh,
Who would have dreamt that you would have had this many races that are separated by just a teeny tiny number of votes?
yeah.
And you're trying to dig out of, in some places, 3 feet of snow throughout the whole election process, and then add in a holiday, and man, you get to the point where, wow, it's a week later, and here we are.
Mark,
Still don't know the results of what, 3 or 4 races, maybe?
Yeah, right now we're looking at Senate District 12. I'm just looking at that one. I really don't see it coming in on that one with the remaining cures and things like that. We're looking at HD 16. That one is really close. Mayor of Palmer Lake, Mark, you probably have been looking at that one as well. And also 2D for the city Colorado Springs question. So that one flipped right before the weekend.
So
Yeah,
that we're surprised by that.
Yep.
it was kind of fascinating to me because 2D and 300 were almost identical,
They were.
and then 300 stayed and 2D dipped. Do you know? I mean, is that people who voted on the day of the election getting counted later? Or certain precincts? What group of voters was that?
So Kyle, I will tell you, we got literally slammed on election day. Prior to going into Monday, we had a clean desk. So everything that came in the week prior, over the weekend, we worked the Saturday, Sunday prior to election day. So we came in clean desk. Everything was already gone through pre-processing, signature verification, tabulation. We were rocking and rolling. But I will tell you is our VSPCs, you probably saw stuff on social media. We had lines of about 200 to 300 people deep nonstop on election day, and also on the ballot boxes. But one thing is, I was really concerned, a lot of people, when the weather came in, that they would leave. But thank goodness Mother Nature held up. But guys, no one left.
Yeah.
There was no bickering. There was just, I was like, guys, let me see what I could do. They're like, Steve, it's good. But what was strange about it is a lot of voters brought their mail-in ballot with them and said, this is a historic election. I want to do this in person. I want to go in an old-fashioned booth. It was so strange, where they just wanted to be part of that process and they were okay standing in line. But that is where we got hammered Monday and Tuesday. And our focus was just basically, hey, our ballot boxes, our VSPCs, because we set up an extra 14 on that Monday and brought the total of 38. So, and also making sure the judges were good to go. I saw those guys getting tired. So what I did is I shut down motor vehicle and I dispersed my 95 motor vehicle staff throughout the county. So we did a VSPC class Sunday morning for all 95 motor vehicle workers, and they went out and helped our site coordinators, which was amazing because they significantly helped out with the time in line. So with the length of that ballot, I was concerned that people would be in there for quite some time, but we got through it and we got the last ballots in right before 9 o'clock.
Wow.
So, and we want to talk about some of these races that are still a little bit up in the air and how many votes are left to count. But if you could, and you've done it a little bit here, explain the process of how all of this counting works. Like the votes that come in early for mail ballot are actually counted early, but nobody has the results of those.
Right.
How do you figure out signature verification in that process? Then, what percentage of the vote is that? How many votes then come in on election day, whether they're, turned into a voting box or VSPC? Do you leave the polls open if people are standing in line? Do you not put any results out until the last person that's standing in line has voted? Because I know that El Paso County reported its first bit of results at, I think it was around 8:15, 8:20. And I assume that's because there were people still standing in line, but I don't know. So please give us the process.
Yeah. So Mark, the first thing is when we have ballots coming in, and a majority, about 98% of our voters vote through the secure ballot drop box. Many of them don't use the USPS system, but they'll sit there and just basically go through the secure ballot drop box. And at the initial onset, when we dropped ballots on October 11th, is at that time, we sat there and had 6 VSPCs open. A week later, we opened another 18. And then Monday, we opened another 14. So the process that happens is everything is done by bipartisan teams. So you will never see 2 Republicans teamed up together. You'll never see 2 Democrats. So it's a Republican and a Democrat, or a Democrat and unaffiliated. So they're always bipartisan. But what happens is when these ballots come into the county center here at CSC, is they're brought in by bipartisan teams, and they're actually in secure tubs that have logs. So they're secured on both sides with a chain of custody, and we actually weigh these ballots. So when we can sit there and just basically take a look at what is going on, how much weight is coming from that specific ballot box, is anything out of the ordinary in there that we should be aware of? But we go ahead and weigh them, and we start getting them ready for pre-processing. What happens then is we send them through our Agilis machine, and we do 2 rounds with every ballot. The first round is it goes through. This is where you get your notification from, email or a text saying the clerk and recorder has received your ballot. So that is the first round that actually comes through. The second round that we put the ballots through is we're verifying your signature. And if your signature does not match up, it goes to an election judge who then pulls, the history of basically of your signatures at DMV or, past elections, things like that. If they cannot match up 3 points of reference for your signature, it moves on to tier 2, which is a Republican and a Democrat. It's up to them to sit there and take a look at it going, you know what, this signature does not match. And Mark, here in El Paso County, every signature gets human eyes put on it. So we are looking at each and every signature. So If the bipartisan team goes, we cannot match this up, there's no 3 points of reference, then we send out a cure letter that night.
Can you
That
tell us what percentage of signatures don't match and where a cure letter's sent?
Yeah, so we were looking at one time about 8,000, but Mark, that's out of 384,000 ballots that were cast. So, it's a small number, but for some of these races, it's pretty significant because now we're looking at
Yeah.
these cures that are having some impact. Um, but what happens is a voter has 8 days to cure their ballot. They can go to a online or an app called Text to Cure, which is TXT, the number 2 cure. They can sit there and do their signature, provide voter ID, all kinds of things, from work or the comfort of their couch. However, if they do not cure their ballot, then that is turned over to the district attorney to be investigated for voter fraud. So I've been out there basically saying, guys, cure your ballots. You need to get out there and do this. We have been extremely busy because both major parties and a number of campaigns have been requesting daily the cure lists. So they're out there chasing individuals down to get the cure list. But what happens, Mark, from it passes through signature verification? So then what it goes into is tabulation, where that's where we tabulate the votes, or it also goes into adjudication. We saw a lot of that this election, and there was thousands of ballots that needed to be adjudicated because voters would sign their name on the ballot, so we would have to adjudicate that. Or instead of coloring in the bubble, they would put a check mark, so we would have to adjudicate that. Or the vote for president, I can't tell you how many times Mickey Mouse got as a write-in. So, we would have to adjudicate that. But these are just some of the things I think my job going forward is trying to educate folks of. This is what slows down the process, is when you go into adjudication. The other thing is duplication happens in this room as well. Our overseas, Mark, you and I, we did that when we were in the military. And by the way, happy Veterans Day, dude.
Oh, you too.
So,
Thanks.
absolutely. But so duplication is for our overseas military members and families. They waive their right to anonymity because they email their vote back. And of course, our judges are going to know who the voter is and how they voted. So they waive their right. And what we do is we have bipartisan judges that duplicate that ballot so we can put it through the tabulators. So we had a lot of military step up and vote from overseas.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yep, we had a lot.
They have until tomorrow to complete that voting process.
Yep. So right now, their stuff had to be postmarked on election day, and we're just waiting on the postal service to get it back to us. So
For those that just mailed their stuff back instead of engaged in this email process.
Yep.
So, Steve, are those folks then, are all of them deployed overseas right now and they have a local address? Is that what that is?
Absolutely. Yep. So they're deployed overseas. They call this place home of record. That is something I've talked to the military about a lot, Kyle, because there is a major difference between home of record and home of residency in the military. So many soldiers or airmen, Marines, Navy, they will not change their home of record because of tax reasons. Some will say, you know what, I am not giving up my home of record of Texas or Florida because they don't pay an income tax.
Okay.
So they know if they change their home of record to Colorado, they're paying an income tax. So they're very aware of that. But home of residency is where they reside at, but their home of record, they still have a driver's license in Texas.
Okay.
They're paying taxes in Texas.
And that's also something, as a guy who's in the military for a while, you don't want to change that every 2 years when you move, from state to state to state. You don't want to have to go get a new driver's license and, change all of that stuff. So you just maintain your home of record where you came from. In my case, it was Illinois, maintain my home of record there, and then moved from state to state to state and didn't have to then, switch my driver's license around and all that stuff.
Yeah, Mark, I'll tell you what, one of the neatest things that I have seen in my career in public service, There were buses pulling up to our Fort Carson branch for soldiers and, service members to vote. We were over 200 soldiers deep at all times at the Fort Carson branch. No complaints. And a lot of them just sat there and said, you know what, I don't have time to do the UACAVA process. I just want to participate in the federal election. So we provided them a federal ballot. But what happens in those different stages it's time consuming. We had over 800 judges helping us out. But the other thing was when you get slammed on election day, and I pushed so hard for voters to help us out because I knew is if we went into election day and about 30% of the vote was going to come in on election day, it was going to take us a couple days. Now I'm glad Mother Nature held off until after 7:30 on election night to start doing her thing. But
Yeah.
with all the snow, I will tell you, staff and the judges, there was not one complaint whatsoever, and we got her done.
Wow.
So why did you, again, I know results got released at about 8:15. That was a little bit later than other counties. What was the reasoning for that?
So it's actually statute, Mark. I actually became very familiar with that because I made a comment to Angie, who's my elections manager. I sat there and said, hey, we can't post anything until everybody at the ballot box, or if they're at the VSPC till they vote. And she said, yeah, she said, Steve, however, there's statute that we have to put it out there at 8 p.m. And historically, Mark, we've done 7:30. We've done a 7:30 push, 8:30 push, 9:30 push, but we still had over 100 people in lines at 8 o'clock.
And so you're kind of trying to balance the,
Yep.
Hey, this is a statutory criteria with, we want to make sure everybody gets to vote. And I don't know, maybe that's something that needs to be cleaned up in election laws in the state of Colorado.
Mark, I tell you what, I absolutely agree, because although it didn't happen here, can you imagine being a voter that stood in line for a half hour, 45 minutes, and all of a sudden you get this alert where they start calling races and your candidate's like, okay, my candidate's out, I'm not going to vote. And they just get up out of line. So those are things that, I was absolutely watching the entire time, but nobody got out of line. It was a long day. The other thing that was holding us up is for our outlier VSPCs, the Cowhands, the Falcons, the Fountains, what usually takes an hour or half hour to come back with the ballots took an hour and a half, 2 hours because of the road conditions on election night.
Yeah.
So it took some time, but I will tell you is the law enforcement agencies that stood up, DOT that prioritized our VSPCs and ballot boxes, clearance stuff. It was a no-brainer, guys, to activate the Office of Emergency Management. And Mark, you've been there when you were the chair of the Board of County Commissioners. It was absolutely amazing where those guys were on top of it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, so in those, when the votes are counted, I want to make sure people are able to understand this. When the votes are counted, that sort of the first votes that are, that initial dump of votes, that's all votes that were, sent in earlier, correct?
Yep.
And then it's the day of votes that get counted last.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
I was just curious, and maybe I read this wrong, but I thought I got it right at the beginning, because I worked on one ballot issue this cycle, and so I was looking at voter turnout from 4 years ago. And I want to say voter turnout in 2020 was 84% in the county, and this year it's 77%. We actually had lower voter turnout.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Kyle. I was actually estimating 90%. I hit the mark with the number of in-person voters. I was, estimating between 35, 36,000. We actually had 35,000, just shy of 35.5. I was estimating a 90% turnout. But after talking with folks over the last couple of days, people got ballot burnout. They didn't want to vote because they're like, I have no idea who these judges are. I have no idea what these, even with the city of Colorado Springs with 2D and 300, they're like, this is so confusing. I just don't understand which one's asking what.
Yeah.
And plus a lot of the propositions and initiatives
14 statewide ballot initiatives, most in over 30 years.
Yep. And Mark, people just basically, I cannot tell you how many undervotes that I saw going through the tabulation where they would vote on one race. In fact, there was a ballot that I saw where it only voted for district attorney and skipped everything else.
Michael
Wow.
Allen's ballot.
I think it was his wife. Yeah. And so I don't know, maybe it was Michael Allen's, but the undervoting was unbelievable. And, and a lot of campaigns really didn't understand as we were pushing the information out. They're like, Steve, the numbers that we're getting aren't matching up to your website. But what they did not factor was the undervotes. And
Yeah.
it was pretty similar across the board for all House district and Senate district races, is about 4,000 voters on average in each one of those districts undervoted a majority of those races.
Wow.
Yep.
And so we've got, most of the results are settled for, most people, even with the overseas votes coming in and the cure list. Most races aren't, that's not going to impact the outcome of those races because there's such a discrepancy. But we've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 here. You said the mayor of Palmer Lake, House District 16, Senate District 10, and maybe even, I don't know if they've called, 300 or, whichever one, or 2D, whichever one that was.
Yeah.
So when will the votes be final for all of those races?
So Mark, we are going to post unofficial final results. And the reason they're going to be unofficial is because we still have to do the RLA. The other
RLA?
The risk limiting audit.
Okay.
Afterwards, the other thing is we have one race, which is HD 16, that is now in the parameters of an automatic recount.
That was another question we were going to ask.
And so there, we've already been in contact with the Secretary of State's attorneys today, because they are the ones that are going to have to coordinate it. They're the ones going, hey, this is within 0.5%. They're the ones that are going to provide the order to me to basically do the recount. So
and that's within like 0.06% or something.
Mark,
it's like 21 votes out of almost 50,000 or over 50,000.
I just sat there and I'm going, man, could we not, to me, everybody wishes for a safe, secure election with very wide margins. This happens.
Come on. Kelty's winning by 3 touchdowns, please. That's a blowout, right? In an NFL game.
Man, don't get me on the Broncos. What the heck happened there?
Yeah.
So, but you know what, though? That one's going to be an automatic recount. And what's going to happen is, of course, we reach out to the parties. We reach out to the candidates in their campaign where they can assign watchers, or they just have themselves come in and watch the whole entire process. And
they're all trying to cure ballots right now, right? Each campaign's out there trying to get more, I know this person is a Democrat and their ballot isn't cured. So if I'm the Democrat, I'm trying to get that ballot cured.
And did you say tomorrow's the cure deadline?
11:59 tomorrow night is the deadline. So Kyle, there's a lot of folks out there making some phone calls, on both sides, both major parties and things like that. But the other thing that, lot of folks.
Real quick, do you have in those races, like how many ballots are available to be cured? So like, do you have it broken down by race, and can you share that?
Yeah, Mark, within, Senate District 12 or even in House District 16, we worked 60 cures on Sunday. We worked over 90 yesterday. So there's only going to be several hundred more that are within those district boundaries. But the other thing is, what I've been sharing with everybody is, let's not forget provisionals, because we had, a number of, probably say about 300 provisionals, where some of those came from the jail, from that new Senate bill that we, Senate Bill 24072, to do in jail voting. There was a number of provisionals where inmates were coming down. They wouldn't provide us their name. They were just like, you know what, I just want to vote. Give us your name to make sure, you are who you are and all this stuff. But you know what, per federal law, we can't deny them. So they did a provisional, but we will have also the provisionals wrapped up on Thursday. So everything is going to be done. Provisionals, cures, overseas, we're going to have all that done. And we're going to email everybody and do a major media push that everything is done. We just go into the risk limiting audit. wrap things up, and then wait on the recount if they're still within 0.5% for HD 16.
So,
Yeah,
so
'cause-
unofficial results will be Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
Thursday, got it.
Yep. Thursday. So because 11:59 tomorrow. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, got it.
yep. So we're working that, but right now, Mark, we got a clean desk. We're working it as they come in, but I know there's a lot of volunteers out there for both campaigns that are working the phones and walking the streets.
And really, that's House District 16 at this
Yep.
point in time.
Yeah, because probably not enough votes to impact SD 12.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, looking at that is that, the Republican candidate would have to get 100% of the vote of what's still out there, which is really, really rare. I don't see it happening.
And probably similar thing for the Palmer Lake mayoral race.
Yep. So, in fact, I was watching the whole entire time, guys. I would get the reports each and every time we push, and I'm like, oh man. But when you start seeing races flip, you start going, huh, a lot of unaffiliated on election day voted Republican. And so the stats is the Dems, 82% of the Dems cast a ballot, 87% Republicans cast a ballot. Unaffiliated was 69%, and our other minors were 64%. So it was our minor parties and unaffiliated that dropped us down to 77%.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh, interesting.
It is. So the Republicans came out in force with a showing of 87%.
So here's what's interesting to me. You said Democrats or Republicans came out in force, but Trump only got 53% of the vote in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, that's a pretty low percentage for the Republican presidential candidate.
Well, and Kyle, just keep in mind, a lot of people skip just noticing when I was in there, just checking on the judges, what really, really caught my attention is a number of voters that just skipped that race, which I'm like, it really blew my mind.
Do you know how many undervotes, like what percentage of the people that returned ballots undervoted the presidential election?
Mark, I don't have that now, but I can pull that once we wrap things up and I'll shoot that to you.
I
What I will
appreciate
tell
that.
you is,
That would be interesting.
yeah, when you look at the presidential and you also look at the House and Senate side, the amount of undervotes was significant.
So, and wow, this has been hugely informational. And totally appreciate that. This is huge.
I love the hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely huge. No, I didn't even mean that. Pardon the pun there. But so boy, I tell you what, I've seen a lot of people out there, social media, there's obviously 2020 was rigged and this one was a good election.
Yep.
Can you speak to any differences machine wise, procedure wise, security wise in the way you counted votes in 2020 or the way votes were counted in 2020 in El Paso County versus the way they were counted in 2024?
Absolutely. So Mark, I'll tell you what, it's I put this office in this county in a very good position. And I realized it when the news broke of the Secretary of State having the BIOS passwords out on her website. One of which is what really bothered me about that whole entire process, Mark, was no clerk and recorder knew about the passwords being out there for nearly a week after they knew. Once the news broke, what happened is how I found out. It was one of my election judges here at Citizen Service Center that saw it on social media and said, hey, Steve, take a look at this. And I thought it was basically misinformation. Come to find out it was not. And then a day later, the governor found out. It put us in a very bad situation because voter confidence, I felt, was pretty high. The number of changes that we've done here in El Paso County, and just that situation increased a major fire throughout the state of Colorado, to include here El Paso County, passwords. But the reason why things were different, Mark, is we basically replaced out all the election equipment. And I know you and I've talked about this where none of our equipment can access an outside network or the internet. So I was not worried about any cyber threats or the BIOS password, because with a password, if you cannot get into the network or it has no access to an internet, you physically have to be on that machine where you hit F2 to put the password in. So on the cyber side, we were good because those machines don't have NIC cards, ISPs, modems, or even wireless cards. They're gutted. Mark, as former chair and tour in this place, it's nearly impossible to get inside these rooms, 24/7 surveillance, cipher
God,
lock.
as a county commissioner, I couldn't get in those rooms. Come on.
As clerk, I can't get in those rooms without being escorted.
Yeah.
But there is so much there to include also putting the CPUs in their own individual lockers, and basically the ports have locks themselves. So although 8 machines, were on the list, the BIOS list, the Secretary of State put out there here in El Paso County, but I was not worried about it whatsoever. We did
Eight
have
out of how many?
12.
Okay.
Yep. So with that being said, Mark, there was a cyber employee that came down from Secretary of State's office. The Office of Information Technology, which the OIT through the governor's office, I denied their service because these are individuals that has never worked on election equipment. And I just did not want that scrutiny. I just did not want any of that. So I said, I want a Secretary of State cyber employee. He was deployed, and it was him, my information systems manager, one of my election specialists, and 2 teams. It was 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats that were election judges that oversaw the process and ensured that it was only the passwords that were changed. So we were rocking and rolling. But Mark, that is the major change that we've done. Plus, we basically changed up a lot of things on the signature verification process as well.
Could you explain just a couple of things that you've done there?
Yeah, one
Just
of the things
procedurally?
procedurally, having human eyes on every single signature,
Yeah.
that comes through. Some counties are very dependent on a program called ASR, which is installed on the Agilis machine. But with us, we go through and we also sit there and have eyes on every single signature that comes through. So just having that confidence in the bipartisan judges going, yep, this signature matches, this is good to go, and we move on. But like I said, Mark, I couldn't be more proud. I mean, we dealt with the weather, we dealt with the BIOS passwords, and being one of the first metro counties in the state with the most votes turned in, and the largest county, is these guys hit it out of the park. And I mean, the stage is there. It's theirs. They deserve to take a bow because they did an amazing job.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know that I had any other specific questions, Mark. Did you? This is incredibly helpful. For us election nerds, it's always interesting to dive into the numbers and the percentages and what changed and everything else. So, but it's good to hear the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we want results right now in the instant society that we live in.
Yep.
And I know, people get frustrated, but, at the end of the day, it's much better to make sure everything is done appropriately, votes are
Yep.
counted correctly and accurately than it is to get them released, 10 minutes earlier than somebody else.
Yeah, Mark, you're absolutely right, as I'm not going to shortcut any of the process whatsoever. But the thing is, though, what really, really was humbling is many of our watchers from the candidates and also the 2 major parties that were in here walked around and gave everybody hugs and just said this was one of the best elections that they've been a part of, in quite some time. And I mean, everybody was absolutely well behaved, no issues whatsoever. But I guess the word got out there. It's like Steve Schleiker's like, if you play stupid games, you're going to win a stupid prize. So, but again, I mean, we're still working on it. We have a lot still to do for this election. But at the same time, Mark, to me, um, talking to the parties, talking to the candidates, and talking to the citizens of, let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. What did the voters like about it? What did they not like? Things like that. Because here in November 2025, we got a coordinated coming up, and I'm not done working. There's still a lot of things in elections I still like to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us that incredibly informative discussion about this. I think it's going to help a lot. We're going to get this out. Should be early on Thursday, and
Awesome,
so
man.
people have a chance. By the way, before election night, your previous episode with us was one of our highest watched. So I'm sure that this one's going to be no different, and probably even a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one thing I will tell you though, Mark, is I am getting a handful of emails, and they're, basically folks are asking me not to certify the election. And, basically what that is, and I could tell the verbiage is all the same. And I think it's coming down from an email or statements made by Ron Hanks that he has distributed out. But I will tell you is I don't think many people know, because once I sit there and share is, if I don't certify the election, and basically knowing the work we've done and the 800 election workers, the work that they have done, and the full-time staff, is many people don't know, where's the responsibility go? It goes to Jenna Griswold, who certifies it.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, it's the state
No.
doesn't get certified. Do we lose like every person that got elected in El
Yeah.
Paso County? I don't think that's where we want to be.
No,
Yeah.
and Mark, as an elected official, I will never give up that authority, because I'm extremely confident in our security procedures. Everything is good to go, but I will not give up my authority to the Secretary of State.
It just makes no sense at all to
Yeah.
somebody be asking
Yeah.
you to do that. But all right.
Yep. Absolutely.
Nice.
Kyle, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mark, good to see you, man.
Hey, thanks, Steve. We'll talk later.
All
Bye.
right. Bye,
Take
buddy.
care. Very interesting. Always, I mean, I've heard that. I've actually done the tour of the county clerk's office before, where they walk you through the phases of how they count ballots and everything. But always interesting again to hear it and think it through. I mean, I have friends who, over the last few months, I've heard say they question whether our elections are safe. And I'm like, you're crazy. It's we have safe elections. I mean, you look at what Steve talked about and what the process they go through. I have 100% confidence in our elections, and
Yeah.
so it just fascinates me when people don't.
Yeah, and listen, there are always shenanigans in every election, right? But because it's humans engaging in a human enterprise. I mean,
Yeah,
there are going to be issues in every single election that's happened since the very first one.
yeah, but we're talking about a handful of votes, not
right, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's limited, and it very rarely has the opportunity to impact the outcome of the election. Maybe 1960, when you have all these dead people in Chicago voting for JFK. I mean, maybe that one, had some sort of an impact, but no. Our elections, I always like to say it like this: the absolute worst election system in the world, except for all the others, right? I
Yeah.
mean, again, it's to your point, done incredibly well. And I think Steve really articulated for us just how secure these elections are, how accurate they are. We know this House District 16 race is going to come down to an automatic recount. The last time that happened in El Paso County, it was I believe Commissioner District 4 when Lojinos Gonzalez first won. And he was winning by, I think, about 31, 32 votes. And literally when they did the recount, it changed by one.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah. I remember a House district race in 2002. Dan Stewart ran and lost by like 21 votes or 20 votes or something like that. I mean, again, similar numbers to what we're seeing with the V Hill, but it didn't really change at all with the recount. So interesting. Well, yeah. Now we smaller elections for the next few years, but maybe a little less stressful for Steve and his team, but they do a great job. So it's always nice to talk to him and hear about that. So
Absolutely.
what's annoying you this week?
Well, I mean, here's the only thing I got going on this week, and it relates to the election, and it's how people say, geez, based on the way the result happened in this election, it makes it obvious that there was cheating in 2020. Please, that is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let it effing go.
Yeah.
How can you say, you know, same machine, same ways we count, same ways we do things, somehow secure this time, and accurate this time, but not accurate the time before.
Yeah.
I think it's just ludicrous. Again, you're right. We have secure elections in the state of Colorado. Again, sometimes there are some little shenanigans here and there. That does happen, but by and large, our elections are incredibly secure and we get to the right result every time.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. So, well, that brings us to the end of the episode. I think as I just want to share with everybody who's watching or listening, this is going to be my last episode on the podcast. So I've really enjoyed it over the last, couple of years. We've had several episodes and have enjoyed doing this with you. And maybe I'll be able to come back on as a guest at some point or whatnot. But I appreciate everything you've done over the course of this show, and I know you're going to continue on and looking at the issues that are important again to Colorado, which I agree is something that needs to be done. So I appreciate you continuing on, but I just wanted to thank everybody for watching and listening.
Man, I'll tell you, appreciate that. I know that this is going to be the last episode for you, but I just want you to know we never would have gotten here without you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I can't tell you how much that means to me. We wouldn't be in the position to be able to continue this on, but I get it. Sometimes life gets in the way and it gets hard, especially when we're doing something here that not only are we doing for free, but it's actually costing us money, and that,
Yeah.
kind of puts little extra stressors on it. And, we need to get out there and actually do things that are going to enable us to earn a living. So if you're watching and you want us to continue or want me to continue putting this good content out there, please go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, and watch our podcast wherever you can get it. Drop us a comment. Let us know what we can do better, and let us know what you think of what we're doing, and share with your friends too.
Great.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you, man.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Mark. Take care.